Welcome back. Now, Western Cape Judge President John Hlophe has filed an urgent High Court application in an effort that a recommendation by the Judicial Service Commission for a possible suspension and finally an impeachment by the National Assembly be reviewed and set aside. In April this year, Judge President Hlophe was found guilty of gross misconduct by the Judicial Conduct Tribunal for trying to convince two judges, Constitutional Court Justices Bess Nkabinde and Jafta, to rule in favour of then-President Jacob Zuma during his 2008 corruption trial. So to get more information on this matter, we're joined by Zikhona Ndlebe, who's a researcher at Judges Matter organisation. Thanks so much for your time, Zikhona. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning.
So Judge President Hlophe, he was found guilty of misconduct for trying to convince the Constitutional Court Justices Nkabinde and Jafta to rule in favour of former President Jacob Zuma during his corruption trial. But it's been 13 years. Why has it taken so long to bring this matter to finality?
So let's just clarify the first thing, which is that Judge President Hlophe was found guilty of gross misconduct by the JSCT, and then the JSC confirmed that finding, a majority of the JSC. So it has taken 13 years, which is over a decade, for this matter to be where it is at right now, because there have been various delays. First, some of the delays have been because of the court cases that were brought in respect of the matter and some issues relating to legal fees that were supposed to be paid by the Minister of Justice, or the Department of Justice rather. And there have been those delays, but mostly it has been because there have been a lot of contestations that have been going on and a lot of court cases that have been brought in respect of the matter.
So we know that Judge President Hlophe has always denied influencing the two Constitutional Court judges. Does he still have a case to argue in his defence at this stage, Zikhona?
Well, he's always denied it. And right now, what he has essentially done is to halt the process, the parliamentary process, the process by the National Assembly to vote on his impeachment, and the process by the president to suspend him. And whether he's got a good case or not depends on what is before the court, what is before the High Court. So if you look at his papers, he contests the way in which the JCT conducted the hearing, and he says that the JCT did not consider all the evidence that was before it. And also he refers to the rules of the JSC that changed and that were not applied retrospectively. So those are issues that the High Court judge that will be dealing with the matter will have to consider. But now the High Court judge is going to have to consider all the facts that will be before it, and that is for a period of 13 years, which is a very lengthy period. So whether Judge President Hlophe has good prospects of success or not, we cannot say at this point, but I must also note that he also says that the JSC was not properly constituted when the JCT decision was confirmed. So basically, he says that the JSC decision should not be valid. But now, if you look at the JSC Act, Section 2 of the JSC Act states that even if there are members of the JSC that are not present during meetings of the JSC, that does not invalidate a decision that is taken by the JSC. But then Judge President Hlophe says that there will be further argument that will be made in respect of this issue. But his main concern is that there was, according to him, there was no Chief Justice during the JSC meeting. There was no acting Chief Justice, and that on its own is wrong, according to him. And then he relies on a previous case that was brought by the then Premier of the Western Cape, Helen Zille. And in that case, the same argument was made. So we're going to have to play it by the ear and see what the High Court judge will decide on the review application brought by Judge President Hlophe.
And speaking of that, Zikhona, we have a lot of talk at the moment, especially in the public discourse around the impartiality of our judges. And how much of a challenge is this going to be for the High Court judge?
Well, it's going to be a huge challenge. And there have been also questions around the fact that it is it's going to be a High Court judge that's going to be dealing with the matter. And this matter relates to a Judge President. And some people are saying that the Judge President is basically the boss of a High Court judge. So there have been questions about impartiality that will be applicable in this case when it is adjudicated before the High Court judge. But we must also note that it's very important to remember that when a judge is sitting or when a judge is appointed, they take an oath to dispense justice without fear, favour or prejudice. That is in terms of the Constitution. So we would expect that whoever is dealing with this matter will ensure that they consider the facts before them, the law that is applicable, and ensure that they dispense with justice without fear, favour or prejudice, and that there is no partiality or bias that comes into play. So we are hoping that the matter will be dealt with fairly based on the facts and the law that are applicable and nothing else.
And just going back to a matter that you touched on a little while ago, Zikhona. So we are awaiting the court process, of course, for the court application to be heard. That's on the one end. Then you have the JSC, and they were supposed to meet on the 20th of September, which is next week, to, of course, continue to recommend that President Ramaphosa actually suspends Judge President Hlophe, making way then for the National Assembly's impeachment process. You spoke to that briefly. So what will this mean now for these two processes as we speak with all of this going on at the same time?
So the JSC should still meet on the 20th of September. And this matter, it will be heard on the 22nd of September, just 2 days after the JSC meets, the review application. So in Judge President Hlophe's papers, he makes the assertion that the JSC, when it meets, it cannot recommend to the president that he be suspended because he has instituted these proceedings, which means that all proceedings in terms of Section 177 of the Constitution, which relates to the National Assembly, the president, come to a halt. They come to a standstill. That's what he's asserting. But now we'll have to wait and see what the JSC will decide. Will it decide to recommend that he be suspended pending these proceedings, or will it decide that he cannot be suspended because he has instituted the review proceedings, and these proceedings, he's contesting the decision by the JSC, which would in law mean that any proceedings that should be taking place in respect of the JSC's decision come to a standstill. So it will be up to the JSC what it decides, whether to recommend a suspension or not. So we have to wait and see. We cannot predict or tell what the JSC is going to decide.
Zikhona, on another matter, in a few days' time, the official end of Chief Justice Mogoeng's term in office will come to an end on the 31st. And he has been on long leave since May. What are your expectations on this matter? And perhaps also let's talk about the timing and all of the speculation that has gone on with regard to why the Chief Justice has actually resorted to this course of action.
Well, we don't have... We cannot make assumption as to why the Chief Justice has taken long leave, but all judges are entitled to long leave. And if they don't take the long leave, they will forfeit it. And the Chief Justice term comes to an end at the end of October. So those are the reasons that the Chief Justice has provided in relating to why he has taken long leave. And he's not the only judge that has taken long leave at the Constitutional Court. There are other 2 judges that have taken their long leave. So the term of the Chief Justice comes to an end in October, and the countdown has started. We are almost 30 days or just more before his term comes to an end, and would have expected that the president has decided on the process that he will take in appointing the new Chief Justice. And in the past, it has been up to the president who he appoints as the Chief Justice. He would make the selection, and then the candidate will be interviewed by the JSC, and then he would confirm the recommendation by the JSC after the candidate has been interviewed. But what we've been saying is that perhaps a different process should be followed. How about the president nominates a panel of people, and there will not be only one person that he decides to nominate to become the next Chief Justice and interviewed by the JSC, but at least three candidates be nominated to be interviewed to become the next Chief Justice. When doing that, there will not be any perception of partiality. There will be impartiality in that there will be more than one person to be considered with different characteristics, because the role of the Chief Justice is very important. The Chief Justice is the highest judge in South Africa. They are in charge of the administrative functions of the Constitutional Court. They're in charge of the JSC. So there's a lot of responsibility, and we need a person that is going to be able to handle all those responsibilities. So having only one person to be interviewed and considered is a bit risky, because what if that person does not fit the criteria or the characteristics that is needed for a Chief Justice? What other options will there be? But if we have at least three people, then the president will have options to choose from.
And then just to that point, as you say, if there's only one nominee, what about the president's presidential prerogative in this instance and his actual ability to exercise that in this instance?
Well, as we've said, it's totally up to the president, and we are just making a recommendation because we want there to be transparency. There have been a lot of punches that have been thrown to the judiciary, and we wouldn't want to see an issue that arises because the president has only chosen one person. But if there are a number of people, then the chances of any issues arising are very slim. So it is totally up to the president to decide which process that he follows. And you must note that in the appointment of the National Director of Public Prosecutions, the president has the prerogative to appoint or to have only one person nominated for appointment. But in the previous appointment, the president followed a different process, which is opening up the process, which is what we think the president should do in respect of the appointment of the next Chief Justice. But it's totally up to the president.
And just a final question, Zikhona, in terms of time frames, as we say, the current Chief Justice's term comes to an end on the 31st of October. What time frame is there in which to make sure that the appointments are done?
Well, we would have hoped that the process has been undertaken already, but unfortunately that has not happened, and it is quite unfortunate. Well, the problem is that there's going to be an acting Chief Justice in the Constitutional Court, and then there are two vacancies that are there, currently 4 vacancies that are there, and 2 vacancies will be interviewed for in October. And then there was the April interviews that were contested by CASAC, and there has to be a rerun of those interviews. So there are 4 vacancies. So there are a lot of vacancies in the Constitutional Court, which is why we would have hoped that the Chief Justice's vacancies, the Chief Justice's vacancy is filled as soon as possible before when the 30 days come to when the period of the Chief Justice comes to an end. At least the process should have been undertaken, but that has not happened. But we're hoping that when the JSC sits for the October interviews, it will discuss and come to a resolution as to when the appointment of the next Chief Justice should take place. But again, the JSC can only have that discussion, but the president has the last say as to following the process through and nominating or getting a Chief Justice, the Chief Justice process underway. So we hope that it will be undertaken as soon as possible, but there is nothing on the pipeline yet from the president nor from the JSC.
Well, we'll keep our eyes and ears peeled for that. Thank you so much, Zikhona Ndlebe, researcher from the Judges Matter organization, talking to us about the latest High Court application by the Western Cape Judge President John Hlophe to review his possible suspension and also halt the National Assembly impeachment process, among other issues. And we are out of time, but I must just tell you, sad breaking news coming through.